So our next speaker is Richard Marx from Sony Computer Entertainment, and I think he brought a demo.
Actually, first. So I'm going to talk a little bit on a different path. I'm going to give you a little bit more about the technology of games and some of the research and bringing that. And all of these serious games, what I want to say, they can ride the wave of all this technology that goes into the game industry. And they do. They're very familiar with all this technology. So they have kind of a really good benefit from that. So just real quick about myself. My parents opened a video game shop a long time ago, so I've been doing this a long time. I studied avionics and robotics and computer vision at MIT and Stanford. And then I've been at PlayStation R&D for 13 years. And that's a long time in the game industry. I've been doing computer vision mostly is what my thesis work was on. I'm bringing that, now I call myself an experience engineer. It's a cool new name. And I've worked on these different products. But I did this in the breakout session. This was my slide from the breakout session. But what I didn't say was I always wanted, when I was growing up, to be a magician, which is maybe why I have a wand. So real quick, if we could switch to the demo. I'm going to do the demo at the end, but just to get to tease it a little bit here. You see my glowing controllers in my hand. But what you might notice is actually those controllers are those are rendered. So those are being tracked 6 degrees of freedom. And just to prove it, I can switch them to become something else. And they're very fast, very capable. And this is kind of the raw capability of this product that we make. Now, what you do with it in games, you can do all sorts of things, which I'll show at the end. So that's just the basic teaser that you see later, if you can stay awake through all these slides. So I'm a technology person, but real quick on the business side of things, video games are a very large business. You might know that abstractly, but 56% of people have a current generation, 56% of homes have a current generation games console. That's a lot. The one that really surprised me was US children 6 to 12, half of them own a Nintendo DS. That's a large number of kids that have that particular item in their possession. 150 US universities, actually I don't know the real number, it's more than that, but have video game degree programs. The two products I've worked on, one of them is over 600 million in revenue, and the other one's over $1 billion in revenue. So it is a lot of money, it's a lot of people participating in this, and it's affecting the world in a lot of ways. So it's worth paying attention to, at least for that reason. On the technology side, which is more my area, games have really affected the world a lot in the area of technology. Very obviously, graphics is probably the one everyone thinks about immediately, but also in the processing, display, and I'm going to cover these a little bit more in the future. My area is input, so I'll spend the most time on that, and then I'll give a little bit of future trend, looking forward ideas. One of the really important things about the video game industry that has drawn me to it is that you can really iterate quickly in the games industry. If we make a mistake, then the game is bad, people don't like it, you get a bad review. Nothing crashes, nobody gets hurt. So we can try the most bleeding edge kinds of technology, and we do. We just keep pushing all the time, trying to do something that's never been done before. And that's really exciting to me, to be in that industry. As you'll see, I'm going to talk about some of the products I've worked on. I've taken them from all the way from research to product 3 times over. There's not very many industries where you get to do that full cycle so many times so quickly. So that, I feel that actually makes us have to have a responsibility in the games industry to do this stuff. We can't be conservative. We have one of the places where we get to be very aggressive in the technology area, so I think it's important that we actually take advantage of it. So just quickly, I'll go through the other areas that are not my area. Graphics, games have driven graphics hugely, from the original 3D graphics card, the Voodoo, and then Nintendo 64, the big advertisement for that was an SGI workstation in your living room. And then the PlayStation 2 had really high access to graphics RAM, and that was Toy Story in your living room. Really original. Keep going with that. And then the Xbox 360, it's like 250 times more powerful than the Voodoo graphics only 10 years later. So it's really quite big step that we've taken in graphics in the last 10 to 15 years. I recommend it. I'm not going to show this now, but if you get a chance, you should look at this. This is kind of like the state of the art in computer graphics. On the PlayStation 3, Quantic Dream made this video called Kara. It's not really a game, but it's a demo of what games can be. It's very beautiful, and their goal is to make you cry. That's kind of one of the goals they have. They want games to be that good that you can say they're on that level. And then processing. One of the big areas right now, actually, that's exciting in games is cloud computing. And cloud computing is being used for all sorts of things. But in games, we really push the boundaries of cloud computing because we care about latency, real-timeness, and that really drives that industry in a new way because of games. In display, games have always pushed the boundaries on display, and some recent things that have happened, 3D is big right now in the home, and games are actually one of the huge drivers for 3D. Unfortunately, there's probably not enough other drivers for 3D right now, but games are one of the big ones. One of our products has got this kind of neat technology. It's called dual view. If you wear the shutter glasses, instead of making the TV be 3D, you can have two players, and each one will see a different thing on the screen simultaneously. So using the same technology for a different purpose. And then Nintendo did a really interesting product, the 3DS, where it's actually glasses-free 3D on a personal device. And they have a neat thing where you can actually slide the strength of how much 3D you want, from no 3D all the way to strong 3D. And that gives the player control over that, which is neat. And then a new thing that's happening, again, is the head-mount display. Kind of goes through these 10-year cycles where, but this time, actually, the technology is probably ready where it actually can be a good experience, finally. So now to input. So traditional input, Gamepad, there's actually a whole bunch of technology inside the game controller, the traditional ones. And then you probably are familiar with the Wii. There's the Nintendo DS, the stylus input and touch, and iPhone touch. All these things have really changed gaming, and gaming has changed, I think, these input mechanisms. And then the Kinect, I'll talk about a little bit more in the future here. So I used to give this slide, and it used to say, games now, and then it said games in the future. But this slide now has come true. So actually, previously, we used to only have that level of input, and now we have this kind of input to games. So we have all this different input coming in, and we can create, it really gives the player an ability to express himself and put information in the system. What the system does with that, well, we don't know yet. There's lots of things you can do with it. So I've been lucky enough to work in the lab a lot and see some of these come true. So we have, in our lab, we make prototypes all the time. We're always building things, and you can see some of that here. Not all of it comes to product, but lots of this has, actually. That thing I just showed you a minute ago, that's the original prototype for it. It's a foam ball hooked onto a mangled PlayStation controller that I used a Dremel and cut off the pieces. And I'm not supposed to show that, actually. But
nobody has cameras.
Only I have a camera. So, yeah, and then these things actually, getting to see them actually on the store shelves and in products and in people's homes even. And there is a lot that goes into that. I said that we have this ability to be bleeding edge, but we do have different constraints, of course. We have to worry about price performance a lot, or price. The consumer market's very price sensitive. But we actually have an economy of scale, which is great. So we have a lot of different kind of trade-offs to make than something maybe like government research usually would have. And so here, again, from lab to living room or from research to product, I've gotten to do a lot of fun things in the past. This is Jet Li. He just visited our lab randomly, and I happened to be wearing shorts that day, but. And there's my son when he was 3 years old playing with one of our tech demos, and now he's 15. So. And then actually seeing these things again, like I said, in a product, it's a very gratifying thing to be able to turn around things so quickly and see them on the store shelves. So the first one that I worked on is actually iToy, and it's a really simple concept. Just take a webcam and connect it to a PlayStation, and what could you do with that? And that was the first research I did. We did design the camera a little bit special to be good at that. It really is just a webcam, but it's a webcam with some good engineering choices, I think. For example, it's 60 frames per second video, and control over a lot of the camera settings. But the idea was really to use the camera as both a sensor and a video device. So, and what we were kind of surprised by is how well it crossed the boundaries of players. Now with the Wii and things like that, actually, this is, again, kind of well understood that a much bigger market is interested in playing games a different way. But we really were excited to see the kind of core gamers get excited over some of these games, and also a whole new demographic of people. And actually the CEO of Sony. At the time, he was not that, but. Then after the iToy launch, we did some depth camera research. And depth cameras are a very neat piece of technology if you ever get a chance to look at them. There's different ways you can do depth. Kinect uses this triangulation. They all mostly use active illumination right now. But it triangulates based on a pattern that they shine out. Other ones use time of flight, where there are different ways to do that. You can do active shutter and send out pulses of light, or you can have some special phase to the light you're sending out. But we've tried all these different cameras in our lab. We tried them for different things. I'm not going to get to show movies of this, but my focus was on augmented reality and mixing 3D and video together. And so you can see in this video here, it's kind of hard to see, but some of the butterflies are occluded by my body because we have like a depth map. And we can mix the depth map with the video to get kind of a Z buffer for video. And then you can also use it to control things. And I do have a video of this one. So this is one of my colleagues. He did work on real-time motion capture using a depth camera. And this really is the predecessor to Kinect. Unfortunately, we stopped our research because the expense of these things was pretty high at the time. This is 2003, I believe. So maybe 2004. And Microsoft picked that up, and they went way further with it than we did. I mean, their skeleton tracking and things is much better than what we had at the time. And so, yeah, so it's pretty neat how you can interact with these things. This is the Matrix came out around this time. So, but it was. So I get the question: are you upset that Microsoft made this? And actually, I'm glad that somebody made this, right? So I'm really glad that the Kinect came out as a product. And it would have been better if Sony had done it for me, but I'm glad that it happened in the industry anyways. And a lot of these things happen that way. You know, there's a little idea here, maybe you don't figure out how to productize it, and then another company figures out what they want to do. Instead, what we did is we focused on our goal is to make cameras more pervasive, and to do that, we thought we needed to be lower cost. So we made another 2D camera, and we made it better in every way than the iToy. And we had hoped to put it with every PlayStation 3. That didn't happen in the end, but that was the kind of design goal of this. And so we made 640 by 480 now at 60 frames per second. It's uncompressed video, so there's no artifacts in the video, so we can do image processing on it without these JPEG artifacts and things. It had a 2-lens system, so you can be wide angle or narrow angle. And it did make our tracking much better. We were able to track small things like this card has markers on it, and it can do augmented reality on it. It can do other feature tracking. But really, where it got utilized to the most is PlayStation Move. And that's what I'm going to talk about now. PlayStation Move takes a lot of what I did in avionics and brings it into a product which is this controller, but it has a lot of complicated engineering inside. So out of the output is 3D, which includes position and orientation. And the camera tracks it, but it also has sensors internally. So, yeah, sorry, I already showed this image. But in our lab, we built that original prototype, and we did a few functional prototypes. Then we actually made an engineering prototype and iterated. And this is the kind of process we went through for this product. And this is the first time it was really in such a very rigorous way for me that we did these kind of iterations. And we didn't do the design or the design prototype, but we encouraged some of the features of it. Like the handle shape, this kind of curved piece like that is really intentional because it doesn't slip out of your hand that way. Same as like a lot of tools are designed that way, where it's bigger on the bottom. Also, if you have a smaller hand, you can kind of choke up on it and go higher, and then it also fits your hand better. So some of those kind of things were actually part of the functional prototype. So what is it, real quick? It's a colored sphere on the end. We can change the color. It's got a 3-axis accelerometer, a 3-axis gyro, 3-axis magnetometer. We don't use the magnetometer anymore. We had too much problems with internal magnetic fields and things. But so that's what is inside there for sensing. It has rumble, Bluetooth wireless, lithium-ion battery, and all that together gives us the ability to do what I'm going to show in a few minutes here for the demo. It's really got two major areas. There's 3 of us that worked on this. I did basically the very initial thing, and then there's 2 other guys that joined, and one of them worked on the first part, and one of them worked on the second part. So that's how we kind of split it up. The tracking, we detect based on color, and then we have a model of what the sphere should look like. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. The next part is actually fusing all the sensors together, and that's where it really is very much like a satellite inertial navigation system. It's taking gyros, accelerometers, and position data, mixing them together, and trying to get the best answer as possible. And there's a little bit of redundancy in there, so if you do occlude it partially, we can fill in the gaps with the Kalman filter. The sphere tracking, it's probably over-engineered actually in the end. We can actually track sub-millimeter, so we have this really good vision system for it. And that's because we kind of made the easiest problem you can imagine, a glowing ball in front of a camera. but we also went beyond the simple part, and we have a model of the lens of this, because every single camera we use is the same, so we can model the lens accurately and fit this model. There are a lot of issues. It seems like the easiest problem in the world, right? You're just going to have a glowing ball, and you're going to find where it is in 3D. Well, it's actually not that easy, it turns out. There's a bunch of engineering issues. Occlusion comes up, of course, all the time. Motion blur is a big factor. These cameras can be 60 frames per second, but people can move really fast. Rolling shutter, for low-cost cameras, you always have rolling shutter. And if you know what that is, basically every row of the image is imaged at a slightly different time, that means. So if you move sideways, the ball shears through the image. So we have to kind of deal with that. And then actually, when we went to manufacturing, we ran into all these problems. We had this great system, and then there's a 15% variance in the sphere shape, or the coloration of the plastic, or the LEDs, are 25% variance. So we had to calibrate those. So there's a lot of issues when you finally go to manufacturing that we had to deal with. So I'm going to show that demo in a minute, but before I do that, just a few thoughts of what I think is happening in the future. Input is still the hot area. There's going to be some really major things that are qualitatively different happening in the input space. I can't talk about those, actually, and I don't know what other companies are doing exactly, but that is still the hottest area. Another big area right now is life gaming. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Nike's Fuel Push. They have this wristband, but they also have shoes that send data. I'm wearing one right now. It has Bluetooth, it has accelerometers, and it can send that data to your phone in real time and keep monitoring what you do. It shows you how far you are in your progress. So it's like a video game, but it's like part of my life now. So, and Google Glasses are, they're not talking about gaming yet, but the same way the iPhone didn't talk about gaming, and now many people play games on their iPhone. I think the same thing will happen with Google Glasses. Kind of a different way than this kind of life permeating thing is total immersion, where you just completely devote yourself to playing a game. And that's when you want to go to like a head-mount display. That's probably a much smaller market, but it probably a very serious, hardcore market will be interested in that. And then the last area that I think is probably after input is going back. For a long time, it was all about graphics and getting the display better. I think now we're all about putting more data into the system. But then we're going to want to get data back out of the system, and in a more personal way, maybe a private way. So a lot of things right now are public, and audio is kind of public too. Maybe if you have a headset, it's private. But haptic is always personal. You're the only one that's feeling what's happening on the screen or on the button that's happening. So that one, I think, actually I've seen a lot of research in that area right now. And the question I always get is about brain interface. And everyone says, when is that going to happen? When will games be played through brain interface? That actually isn't a very exciting area for me. I personally like it when my body is involved in the gameplay. I like it when the adrenaline, is flowing through me. I like I've spent a little bit of time studying like somatic learning, where your body is engaged in the learning process. Going up to the board and writing something on the board actually matters because you got up and your body was involved. So I'm not trying to get to the brain interface. That's not the end goal for me, I guess. So with that, I'm going to switch real quick to the demo. And this is, you guys are all engineers, so I'll try to break the system if you want, so just so you can see. But if I cover it up, the rotation still works, but the position now starts to drift because the accelerometers aren't very good at being integrated twice. But as soon as we bring it back, it fixes it because it's just detecting it every time. And if you do real quick things like go behind your back and stuff, you don't really notice those problems because we fill in the gaps well enough. But you could put anything on this object. You can have different sports. You could have this one's one we were really excited about, maybe for like education, because it is such good control that you could actually zoom into maybe where we are. Let's see, and just not in this demo. We do have the dot and the make dot believe. And then let's just go to the next demo here. Yeah, just using that as an input device. One is a flashlight, and this is my hand, and I can reach out, and I feel like I can really touch. These demos we have all work with 3D glasses too, and that adds a whole nother level when you can actually know exactly how far away the hand is from the object you're reaching. The shadows help a lot, but shadows still don't replace 3D fully. So I keep hitting the wrong button. So this one, remember this is a dummy. It's just made out of wood, so just a warning. Yeah, so I have a sword here. I can can bump him, tap him, and I can. Let's see. Let me see if I can reach around, lift up his legs. You know it's coming, all right? And then, of course, I can treat him like a video game. And you can, and then you can reach up. You can do all, video game people expect you to be able to do all these kind of things all the time. So when we used to have our old demos, they're like, oh, can you chop off the light? No, you can't chop. So now, so now we have to put all that in there. And you can also do other things, like this controller, instead of, this one's a sword, but this one's like the Force or something, so I can pick him up, I can shake him around, I can throw him off the screen. And you can pick him up, and then I missed. And you can do other things, like, there's a lot of things that start to come out. You can throw this object, and it behaves like it should. And I can just kind of let it go. Yeah. This demonstration is just showing some procedural particle rendering. So I can just kind of create these things just by moving them around. And I can throw it like a fireball. I can make a big one like this. If I had like a large group of enemies I had to attack, I could throw it. So a lot of different kinds of things you could do. Oh, this one's broken. This one, I think I have them in the wrong hand here. This one is just a puppeting demonstration. So I have this. You could do it with augmented reality like this. I can actually squeeze the triggers and then control his hands. So I can do different things. So Kinect has kind of popularized this already. They don't usually do it so much for, we add different effects. So like if you can have a giant hand. That's the kind of video game side of it, right? Of course, this is a skeleton, but I actually want this. Or maybe if you're like a X-Men fan, you want this. Wolverine class. And you can do it in augmented reality, or you could do it kind of over the shoulder, first person, or third person, So this one is probably the world's only Chameleon Simulator. So if you think of these hands as my chameleon hands, we were studying navigation, how you could move around 3D worlds. And if you think about just reaching into the scene here, actually, sorry, let me just reset. If I reach into the scene and I grab and I pull myself, maybe like a chameleon would.
It's like laparoscopic surgery, actually.
Yeah. So, and this one, it doesn't have all the physics and things. It's just a graphics demo, but you get the idea. And also, you just feel like you can control the whole world, just like moving around. And if you're like my colleague, he's really good at this, and you can climb really quickly. He has a chameleon. There's physics. You can pick up objects. That one's not quite as interesting. This one, actually, just we're exploring what you could do with more of a UI for windows or something. So you can make windows. You can reach out and grab the windows, move them around, throw the windows. And that's fine. You can put whatever kind of shape you want on there. But actually, we have a lot more data than these 2D endpoints that I'm moving windows around. And windows are kind of old gen. So we can something much more dynamic in 3D because we have all that information about the angle. So I can put that up there. Actually, I could make video of me on the. And I can switch into more of a virtual reality environment instead of that augmented reality environment. So you can put like posters around a desk or something. And the one we really like is this one where you have like a map and you can actually just feel like you've just laid it out on the ground. But the last part of this that really was what got us the most excited is you see that magenta or the cyan controller there. Well, imagine I want to see the world from its point of view. We call this Camcorder Mode, and hopefully I'm not too nervous, but if I switch into where it is, then I can actually zoom around and move around. So it's just like I'm holding a camcorder and looking at that stuff. And that is just my handshake, if you could see. Let me steady myself. And so that's just another cool thing that we think could be in video games. I got one more demo here. And this one is a modeling demo. It shows some of the more creative things you could do. You could spin it like a lathe, this thing. I'm pulling the trigger to make it spin. And the other one I can use as a tool to carve, maybe carve like this. And the thing about this is that I'm just doing this with these objects, right? I mean, to try to do this with a mouse and keyboard would be just not even possible. So to be kind of creative is so much easier. Can reach out. This is like a sword. So again, the video game thing. I want to make a notch in my sword, or I want to, let's see, switch tools so I can instead of carving, I can like kind of shape my sword and maybe. Maybe I want to be have been in a battle recently, so yeah. But so again, you can just feel it feels like you can do a lot of things. Actually, if you do go to this object, this is already starting with a lot of geometry done, and this is where it really gets good because I'm not good enough to make that, and I'll never, even with these tools, I'll never be good enough to make that. But when I start with that, I can make really unique things. I can grab the ears, and I have symmetry turned on right now, so whatever I do will happen to both sides. I could give him horns, I could go up to his chin and pull on his chin, create him. You can do all sorts of crazy shapes. And then if you don't like it, you just undo it and start again. Yeah. And I could switch the tool back to the carving tool, and then I could, give him like a big scar across his head. Oh, I still have the symmetry on. Oops. Yeah, so maybe one scar on this side. And then again, you can paint. You can paint anything you want. And you could change the color and things like that too. So you could do lots of things. You could do it to any kind of shapes. Paint. Yeah. So, and I think I do have one more demo. So this one, we had a lot of trouble just leaving these things in a store because they're, people don't know what to do with it. So we made this demo to encourage our product people that this is the kind of thing that if you just want people to pick it up and play with it. So this is just a puppet. You pick it up, and all the buttons do something, but it doesn't break anything. So if I squeeze this, it makes him talk. I can make his eyebrows raise and things. I can. It's supposed to be like a real puppet, so if I turn on his hands, this is the way rod puppets actually work, is this moves around his hands. I can make him clap. So I just have, and then this is if you just leave it sitting there, every kid will understand exactly what to do. And so move him around, make him have a little conversation. So, and that ends my talk, so I'll be happy to. By the way, all these demos will be at lunch. You can come and try them yourself if you want. So.
And also, Sony has an SDK available for PCs and Macs.
Yeah.
And I know in my health community, we have a ton of people doing stuff for physical therapy with Sony. Even Sony's cooperating in terms of providing some help there and stuff. So these tools are actually available for non-entertainment uses right out of the box.
Yeah, the way it works actually is it's called Move.me, and it needs a PlayStation 3 and the camera, exactly the setup I had, but it just exports all the data over to whatever device you want to use it on. So it's just like the front-end system. So it doesn't take any processing away from whatever you're doing, but it does need the PlayStation 3 in the loop to do all the processing.
Okay, questions?
Everyone's hungry.
People want to get in line for the demo. So how many people are in the lab total for all of this?
These products are really coming from 3 research people, but we have, I mean, our Sony R&D, PlayStation R&D is like 100 people total, but they focus more on other topics like graphics and physics and compilers and other stuff like that.
So I hate my job after seeing yours because that's so cool. But as somebody who makes these games, and you alluded to having a kid, what do you? I mean, even though these are more active, like what do you think about making all these games that bring kids inside as opposed to going outside and playing? And just what's your philosophy or theories on that?
Well, my personal philosophy is my kids all play sports. My kids all, read a lot, and they play video games. They have a pretty good balance of all that. I think that's the most healthy way to be. I think trusting to get all of your exercise from video games is probably a bad idea. Trusting reading to give you all your exercise is probably a bad idea too, though. So I think video games can be healthier. They went to a kind of a dark place for a while, and we're trying to bring that back to some degree. Not all the companies are doing that, but there is a strong emphasis to make things darker all the time, and I think that the Wii, iToy, those were good things to broaden the base. The technology can be used for anything, so that's kind of the point, is that it's a really rich set of technology that we have in the game industry. You can use it for learning, you can use it for medicine, you can use it for healthy kinds of gameplay, or you can use it for destructive ones.
Quick question, very impressive. So you showed the inputs from 2 hands. How about, say, 2 legs and also a voice to have a further enhancement of the input?
We do have some other things that I'm not showing here. Like the microphone on the top of that camera is a 4-microphone array, and it can do beamforming. We haven't really put that into any of our games. Kinect does a lot of that for voice recognition stuff. Legs, we only have 2D data, and it's pretty hard. You can do some things by background subtraction and things like that, but again, we've never found any of that robust enough for games. Kinect, by having 3D data, they do some legs. Actually, I don't know if you noticed, but the guy who was hitting the punching bag with the 3D data, still the legs weren't very reliable when we were doing that, so we just made up the legs, and that game wasn't about kicking, and so we just made the character step when you move your torso. And actually, you don't even notice when you're playing that it's not your legs, because you don't pay attention exactly to that part of the system.
One of the issues also is that they're finding, even with Kinect, that people don't necessarily have large living rooms. So they actually can't pull themselves all the way back, even though they're doing some full body tracking. It's only working in certain people, certain sizes and stuff. So I thought we had one here. Yeah.
Reed Hendershot with Air Products. I wonder if you could talk about product cycle in terms of development time, how long it's on the market, because it seems to be a pretty fast-changing industry, and then just kind of when you go to the next generation, things like that.
Right. Well, so the iToy work was maybe a couple years of research, and then a year. I actually went to the London studio, the guys that made the game eventually, and I just worked with them for 3 months to transfer tech. I know that Microsoft has done it a little bit differently, where they actually have their researchers on the game teams. That's kind of how I did it with iToy, but we didn't do that in the other products. The game cycles go anywhere from a 1-year cycle to make a game to much longer. But these games, for this kind of thing have never been more than 18 months, as far as I know. In the research side, we often have this. I actually have a slide. Yeah, slides up. Yeah. I saw somebody give this talk once, and it really resonated with me about the different kinds of way research exists in industry. iToy was the push model. Nobody in the company wanted that to exist on the product side. So then as a researcher, you try to push that out, and it's very hard. Pull is much easier when they're asking the researcher for something, but then you get on a product schedule, and then it's not much like research at all anymore. So the pull tends to be evolutionary. And then there's the other kind, which is stockpile. And the color tracking we were doing with colored balls and stuff with iToy, that got stockpiled because nobody actually wanted to make a product. But then it came all back out when we made the move, and we had all that tech ready to go to make move into a product. So I guess these are the areas, and sometimes it doesn't turn around all the way to product, but it's still, keep it in the vault. Back there.
So to follow up on that question about, inside versus outside, what are some of the limitations to taking some of these things outside, and is anyone looking at how do you do augmented reality outside?
Do you mean outdoors?
Yeah, outdoors. Oh. Outdoors and interactive, where you have multiple people in multiple locations interacting in a different way outdoors.
Let's see. I guess it depends exactly what you want to do. What you mean, if you have like a head mount glasses or something, it's hard to deal with the sun and have any active illumination because the sun wins pretty much all the time. It's hard to create anything on the same order of brightness as the sun. So you have to use markers that use the sunlight, potentially. We've done things with retroreflection, where if the sun's there, you track them without the light, but if the sun isn't there, then you have to shine a light on it. That's worked okay. It gives you less ability to change the color of things, though, because it can only be whatever color it was. The colored lights, the reason we chose them, actually, is so that if you're in this room, and let's say the camera was facing there, and that red 1208 right there, well, then the red would be hard to track because there's a red glowing object. So this would then change its color automatically to find a color that could be tracked. And also the game developers have used the color for some things to show what's happening in the game, maybe health or something. But I've never done much work outside. I guess previously I worked in underwater robotics, and that also was dark. So we provided our own light.
Hi, Richard. Great talk. There's something about a game system that predisposes people to think about it as something for fun and maybe in a different way than a PC or a tablet or a handheld computer, where your mind is more open to thinking about it, both in terms of education or business or anything, and games as only one component. What do you think are the best examples of where game consoles have been used for education or for scientific research or for the kinds of interactions that the previous speaker talked about in terms of serious games?
I guess the best example I know of is the PlayStation 1. There was a project called Net Eurose where they just let those devices be programmed by a company that brought them into classrooms. And basically you have a really low-cost computer is all you got out of that. I think it felt like a computer to people, though, because it still had a keyboard and mouse. If you're talking about how it's been used without keyboard and mouse for those purposes, we already saw some examples. Folding at home is how PlayStation 3 got used to do a whole bunch of protein folding computation. So if you're not playing a game, you just let that run in the background, and you're basically giving electricity to the research industry and a lot of computation power. Let's see. You probably have more examples than me.
There's a lot of different examples. I mean, I think the question that you're asking, though, is a little bit more subtly interesting, which was like that if you're situated in a console, does the person's mindset change to make that? At least as a parent, my kids are not like that as much anymore. And they're young enough not to have those distinctions, and they see games kind of across multiple platforms and different types of things, and it's just all one language to them. I think the thing that I've seen mostly in some of the console stuff has been, the games that are just have a lot of creative elements in it, like Little Big Planet from Sony. My kids went from playing it to then opening it up and starting to build their own levels. And once they made that kind of jump, that was really important. I think the other thing that's also often missing, especially with all these new input methods, and how it's widened the field, is new forms of family play that are taking place. And you know, walking in one day and finding my wife playing Little Big Planet with my two sons was really, really wild, and how communicated to her that was like really important to them. She won't play Legos, she won't get down on the floor and build blocks, right? So two boys, it was hard for her. But this like was a commons for them. So I think sometimes we look too much at the core utility, which we're doing a lot with, but there are researchers like Kurt and others who are even looking at just the, for lack of a better word, the sort of generic utility that's coming out of these kinds of new systems of interaction, especially when you go in the living room from a console standpoint, as opposed to, I have a whole collection of iPad games that are two-player iPad games that I've been looking at for research purposes. But a lot of these, you know, where the majority of the new kind of attention is in this very, very almost, you know, personal device, and the only multiplayer aspect is over a distance and, you know, unbeknownst to you. And the consoles are still a place where you gather together as a group, and I think that's something we don't want to necessarily lose.
Yeah, and maybe to be fair, maybe if your question was going in this direction, it is, as a company, we have to be a little bit careful that we don't try to tell you that the PlayStation is a computer, because we don't want you to think of it exactly the same way as you think of a computer, because there's a lot of baggage that comes with computer to people. So we do want it to be a thing that you want to turn on, and if it feels like it's something you don't want to turn on, we don't want that message. So from a brand perspective, there is some distancing from things that are maybe not considered something you'd want to enjoy doing.
Sort of the early post-PC that we now ascribe to tablets.
Well, there was at the very beginning with exercise was a big controversy in our company because it's not the workstation, it's the PlayStation. So, so we did, and there was a strong push against any kind of exercise unless it was fun. So.
That's shared by exercisers too.
Sorry, somebody's been waiting.
Yeah, the question I had is about the input side. So again, in my workstation at the office, the mouse is set to super sensitive, so I don't have to move at that much to get across the whole screen.
Right.
And so the video inputs, it seems like you've got large motions, you know, for the same kind of input. So do you see like a tension between the original analog controller, where you have precise control for driving, versus the the wide motion where there's more energy in the same range? Yeah,
there's definitely the right interface is always the right thing to use. So mouse is really great because you don't get tired because your hand is resting, and 3D mice aren't so popular because of that same reason. It's like you have to hold it up in the air. But if I'm giving a talk like this, a 3D mouse would be way better than a 2D mouse because I'm not fixed. Same thing for these kind of controllers. In the living room, mouse isn't the best device because it's hard to have a surface that you can do it on. And then in that case, we found that our controller can be used for something like a real-time strategy game like SimCity. You could play with this. Whereas the controller, the gamepad, you say the analog stick is really good, but it's actually not spatially good. It's always kind of a relative position, not an absolute. So I don't think we'll ever replace any of these other devices. That's not the goal. It's just to have a richer input mechanism. This one is a little bit of jack of all trades because it is a 6 degree of freedom controller, but it definitely doesn't replace the mouse or even the gamepad. The gamepad's very abstract, and that's also good for other things.
When we have looked at gamers who can only move a controller to get the same reaction, they actually choose to use the gross motor movement.
Yeah, actually, a lot of the work I do is motivated by my kids and myself when I was little. But my youngest son plays racing games like this, He like leans when he wants to race, and his brothers, made fun of him. Why would you do that? You don't need to do that. It doesn't help. But it should help, right? That should help. And maybe it doesn't make you faster, but the car should tilt up on its wheels or something like that. That should happen.
All right, so we'll have demos downstairs, and we're break for lunch, and then we have 2 more speakers to complete this part. Thanks.
Thank you.